Welcome back to The Conscious Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Alex Raymond, and today I'm joined by Zach Mercurio, an expert on the concept of mattering and its pivotal role in creating meaningful and engaging workplaces. Zach's work reveals how the fundamental human need to feel significant impacts motivation, productivity, and overall well-being. In our conversation, Zach shares the importance of mattering, explaining its three core elements: our instinctual need for significance, its role in motivating us, and its universal presence across all cultures and generations. We'll also discuss how the absence of mattering leads to withdrawal or acts of desperation in the workplace, skills for leaders and entrepreneurs to ensure that their teams feel noticed, affirmed, and needed, tips on how to embed purpose into daily tasks and long-term goals, and how to measure mattering within your organization and create a sustainable culture where everyone feels valued. This is a really great conversation for entrepreneurs who want to turn their workplace culture into a durable competitive advantage. I hope you enjoy this episode of The Conscious Entrepreneur. Hey, Zach, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on The Conscious Entrepreneur.
My pleasure, Alex. It's exciting to be here. Glad we finally are connecting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that conversation in Colorado, two Colorado folks right here.
Yes, I love it.
Now, you do a lot of work around organizational culture and some really meaningful, meaty work. And I'd like to start today just by orienting around one of the key concepts in your work, which is mattering. And to kick us off, I have a general idea of what this word means, like if I hear the word mattering, but how do you orient toward it, and what do you mean when you talk about mattering?
So mattering is our inherent need to feel significant, and to feel significant to the people around us. And it's three primary things. It's a fundamental human instinct. So as a human, everybody listening, the first thing you did when you opened your eyes is you had an instinct to tilt your head upward, and you looked for a caretaker, and then you reached out your hands and grasped for significance. And so your very survival as a human depended on you procuring mattering to someone else enough to keep you alive. So it's a basic survival instinct. It is a fundamental need for motivation. So when we look at motivation in life and in work, it is almost impossible for anything to matter to a human being who doesn't believe that they matter. You know, if I were to summarize the research on motivation in life and work and meaningfulness in life and work, I would summarize it that way. It's hard for anything to matter to someone who doesn't believe that they and what they're doing matters. And then the third is it's a universal longing. It's evident in every stakeholder group, every culture, every generation around the world. Everybody has the instinct, the need, and the longing to matter. Really quick, it's a little bit different than things like belonging and inclusion. Okay. So a lot of times these get interchanged.
Sure.
I can feel like I belong here in this conversation with you, but not feel like you see me when I'm struggling, or not feel like you see my unique gifts and show me the difference that I make. I can feel included. My voice is included right now in this conversation, but I can also not feel significant to you as a person. So mattering is this primal elemental concept that seems to motivate everything else.
So it's really fundamental. And like you're saying, when we're born, the very first instinct is, do I matter? Is there someone out there who's going to care for me? Can I connect with that person in a way that's going to help me to get my needs met? Therefore, it's super fundamental to my being.
Absolutely. And I would say a lot of the concepts you're probably familiar with that are popular right now are mattering in disguise.
Okay, like?
For example, psychological safety, right? Or like feel safe to speak up. Well, when you were a child, you needed a secure base. It's called secure attachment. So if you have an adult that cares for you, you can go out and take risks, and you can learn, and you can innovate, and you can create. Now, why? You can venture out because you know you have someone to come back to. What psychological safety is, it's really talking about adult attachment in the workplace. If you have a relationship with someone you trust, with someone who has your back, you can go out and take risks. You can innovate, you can fail, you can experiment, and have a secure base to come back to. And really a lot of, or the work on meaningful work, for example. Again, meaningful work is doing what matters to us and what matters to the world. It's mattering by default. Purpose, the crux of why purpose is so powerful. And I know you talk a lot about that, and it's very important for your listeners. Purpose is our contribution. It's the way we add value. So as adults, mattering is really at the core of these concepts. It's I feel valued, and I know how I add value. And Isaac Prilatensky, he's one of the psychologists who founded that feeling valued, adding value model of mattering. But really, it's goes back to our basic need for secure attachment. And where do we get those secure bases as adults? Where do our people get them? They get them from us as leaders. We get them from our peers, our colleagues, in work where we spend a third of our lives.
And so let's translate this concept into the workplace. What does it mean to matter at work? What does it mean to not matter at work? What's the cost to not mattering at work?
Yeah, I'll start with the cost of not mattering. Just like when an instinct to eat or sleep is not met, our bodies and our minds react very strongly. So not mattering either results in acts of withdrawal or acts of desperation. Have you heard of quiet quitting?
For sure, yeah.
It's a very big trend, but a lot of the analysis on quiet quitting missed a key element. Quiet quitting is the inevitable withdrawal response of a human being who feels insignificant to an organization or to someone else. Other withdrawal responses are things like isolating or withholding information or silence, or the terminal withdrawal response is leaving. When we look at the data on mattering and things like depression and anxiety and isolating, when researchers do language modeling of discussion posts around depression or anxiety or even suicide, one of the most common phrases that is used is "no one would miss me if I was gone. I'm not needed."
Mm-hmm.
And so that act of withdrawal, I'm going to withdraw if I don't feel like I'm significant. The other is it's a little bit louder. So feelings of not mattering either result in acts of withdrawal or acts of desperation. Hey,
what's an act of desperation?
I matter more than you think. Complaining, blaming, protesting. A lot of difficult employees are, in my practice, the most difficult employees are employees who feel the most unseen, unheard, unacknowledged, and misunderstood. For example, I'll give you an example. Gossip. A lot of people think gossip is just a person being abrasive or difficult. The two most important predictors of gossip are what's called psychological contract violation. So this is just a fancy word of my expectation of fair treatment from you has been violated, and abusive supervision. I feel exploited. So when I can't speak up to a leader, I will speak out to someone else. And we're seeing that. If you look at the last 4 years, the Great Resignation was really a demand for dignity. You look at the research from the last 4 years, uncaring leaders, toxic workplaces, feeling disrespected, unincluded are all the things that are pushing people over the edge to leave, to withdraw. Mm-hmm. So those are the costs of not mattering to an organization. Innovation, motivation, all those lagging indicators. Again, it's hard for anything to matter to someone who doesn't believe that they matter.
Right. I mean, I'll just say before we get into the other pieces, just the idea that withdrawal and desperation are driven by lack of feeling of significance or the feeling that I don't matter to this. Really interesting to think of, because basically the energy is going way, way down, right? So when someone's withdrawing, they're delivering way less energy, less creativity, less input, less, all the things that you're wanting out of someone. And of course, these days, everyone's trying to figure out how do we get employee engagement to go up and stuff like that, and it's like, well, hey, there's a real root cause issue right here.
Okay, this is a great point, because one of the things that we miss often as leaders, I'm guilty of it too, because I'm a human being, is we tend to go right to the lagging indicators. Performance, innovation, an engagement score is a lagging indicator.
Sure, yeah.
So what are the leading indicators of those things? So let's take engagement. Engagement is a result. It's an outcome. The leading indicators of engagement, the 3 necessary psychological states for engagement. in the research are psychological meaningfulness. I and what I do matter. Psychological safety. My voice matters. And psychological availability. Someone's here to support me. So when we look at, if you want to pursue engagement, you should be pursuing the skills to manifest the leading indicators, right? Which I believe, and my research keeps pointing me toward, is ensuring people feel seen, heard, valued, and needed.
Well, when I hear you say the word skills, this brings up a very interesting point. And I think a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, so our audience is entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs will say, hey, I'm a pretty good people person. I'm motivating. I got people to join my company or, give me money or buy my product or whatever it is. Therefore, I must have some of these intangibles already. Like, hey, I'm just good at this stuff. I'm naturally gifted at it. But I know that in your work, Zach, you make the very strong claim that these are skills that need to be learned. These are skills that need to be developed. These aren't things that we can just have left to chance or natural talent or like see which way the wind blows or some charismatic person or whatever it is. So talk to us about the skills part here.
Well, if you're an entrepreneur, you know that intuition doesn't scale very well, right? When you're trying to scale a product or a business or a company, you're not relying on intuition. You're relying and grasping for what? Systems. But if I ask you, what's your system for product development and distribution, you could probably tell me, what your system is. You probably bring up a lot of flowcharts, apps, whatever you have, coaches. But if I ask you, what's your system to ensure everyone feels noticed, affirmed, and needed around you, I typically get something like, oh, well, we just try to hire the right people. Or often when I ask this question of entrepreneurs or leaders, we over-index on the systems for what we do and how we do it, and we under-index on the systems for who we're doing it with. And as you said, regenerating the human energy needed to accomplish all the what's in the house. So intuition doesn't scale. And when we're trying to scale the experience of mattering, it's very important to have skills and practices to scale those things. And thinking about this in terms of hard skills, I think is really important, because one of the big problems with leadership development over the past half century is that we have termed things like soft skills, which can result in us actually underinvesting in them, and through what's known as an overconfidence bias.
Mm-hmm.
That, oh, it's simple, so it's easy, and I got this, which I think was what you were mentioning earlier. And when we have that overconfidence bias, we're less likely to really dig into and learn and hone and craft these skills.
Mm-hmm. Well, just like you wouldn't hire a salesperson unless they had gone through a certain amount of sales training and knew the frameworks and knew how to handle objections and all those things that you would imagine. That is like the opposite of what we do with leaders and
Absolutely.
C-suite and entrepreneurs. There is no way to say here, there's no way to say, but there's very little put in terms of skill development for this, the way you call it, the system of who we're doing it with.
And that's why I like to call these skills of creating mattering for other people, because it's so basic, just basic human skills. The basic skills to be human with one another. And we've categorized three of them. And I'm not saying that my model or our research or our work is the end all model, right? Models are just helpful because they help us categorize and name something. And I think when it comes to like these essential human skills, we left it up to intuition. So it's important to have for yourself as a leader, as an entrepreneur, a benchmark, just like you would with any other performance indicator.
Yeah.
And so those three major areas for us are, do you have the skills and practices for noticing other people? So truly seeing and hearing another person. The practice of affirming. So affirmation is different than appreciation or recognition, right? Appreciation is, I can show gratitude for who you are, that you're here. Recognition is showing gratitude for your work, elevating that. But affirmation is much different. It's showing you how your unique gifts make a unique difference to me in the organization. And then the third is making sure people feel needed. So making sure people feel relied on and indispensable to your bigger cause is critical. And once we can name something, we can continue doing it. So there are a set of skills we can use under each of those major practices of noticing, affirming, and needing.
So okay, so let's get into those. Let's we want to learn this stuff. So let's say I'm an entrepreneur, early stage entrepreneur, starting a company, or maybe I'm 5-10 people, whatever it is, and I want to get better in this area. And I hear, okay, hey, Zach Mercurio is talking about being noticed, being affirmed, and being needed. Where do we start? What are the actual skills, or what are the best questions to be asking, or how do I start to engage in this process?
Well, I think the first step is to set the motivation and set the right intent. And what I mean by that is that motivation, or any action to do anything, requires three elements. And this comes from BJ Fogg, who's a researcher at Stanford. But you have to have the motivation to do it. So you have to want to do it. Most people want to create cultures where everyone feels like they matter in their organization or the company they're building. But they also have to have the ability to do it. So that's the second ability, the right skills. And third is that your environment has to trigger you to do it. If any one of those three things are absent, the behavior will not happen. So the first is obviously cultivating the motivation and the right intent. And when I say right intent is you're not showing people how they matter so they can produce more for you. People will see right through that. You're showing people how they matter because they're people. The best leaders, really, when we look at leaders who are doing this well, I think of Bob Chapman at Barry Wehmiller. He wrote a great book called Everybody Matters. But he was he had this mentality where people were there to produce for him until he was at a wedding of a friend, and he saw these two people coming down the aisle, and he had this realization and he saw all these people like gazing upon these two people with just love. And he had this realization leading his company that these are people's precious children. Like everybody I interact with is somebody's loved parent, brother, sister, right? And so that moment for him of, we have to treat people not as a means to our end, but an end in themselves, was foundational to how we built his organization. So having that right intent. So why do you want to do this is really important. And a way to really foster motivation for you and the people around you is to have some sort of emotionally anchoring experience. Like, for example, one of the questions that I ask people is, tell me about the time in your life when you most felt like you mattered to someone else. Or tell me about the time in your life when you first believed that you mattered as a human being. And who was there and what did they do? Because when you can bring this to mind for yourself, when you can bring this to mind for yourself, you start to emotionally feel what it's like to experience that, but then you can also spot the practices the other person did for you. And it helps to get out of this realm of, oh, this just happens. You can actually spot behaviors. So that's that first step, right? Is fostering the motivation. The ability is learning the right skills. So let's start with noticing. Noticing is the act of truly seeing and hearing another person. So seeing somebody is paying attention to the ebbs and flows of their life, the details of their life, and offering an action to see them. That shows them that you saw them. One example is I worked with a big distribution center, and one of their managers had a practice. She called it her noticing notebook. On Fridays, she would write down each of her team members' name and then write down one thing she heard them talk about in the last week. So it could have been like something they were struggling with, a complaint about something in their personal life. And she would start her Monday reading what she wrote down and scheduling a 3-minute check-in with each of them to say, hey, I wrote down that you were struggling with this. I wanted to check in on how it was going. Right. So practices like that are really powerful for seeing people, hearing people, affirming people, and showing people how they're needed.
And so this is very broad listening. So this is not me saying listening for something. This is more I'm just listening to see what is your experience of life.
Well, yeah, I'm just seeing you, right? And then you're asking questions that give people the data to feel seen. So that's another skill. Like, for example, instead of how are you? Or I see leaders do this all the time when they have their like stand-ups, their meetings. They'll say, how's everybody doing? Good? Can you imagine, Alex, if you weren't good? Not right. Me, right? You don't get any data from that. Or how are you, right? How are you is a greeting. Or this is my favorite. I hope everybody's doing well. If I'm not doing well, the last thing I need is your hope. I need your support, right? So asking better questions like, what is your attention today? What's been most meaningful today? What are you struggling with? How can I help? Checking in on how people are doing. Those are all practices to help people feel seen. And then, we can get into practices to help people feel heard, which are the things we've talked about: fostering psychological safety, making sure we're listening for the message behind the message. But I think, to stop right here, this is the noticing practice.
Right. Okay. This is the noticing.
So these are the
paying
practices.
attention.
Paying attention.
I'm reflecting that I'm paying attention.
Truly seeing somebody, but then also truly hearing somebody. And as I've been talking about this, I'm like, I hope people are understanding that just this skill area, right? There's a number of skills and practices that we can use and learn. And there are skills for affirming people and needing people that are as in-depth and as tangible.
Okay. So noticing is the first step. I'm aware of you as a human. I'm committed to you as a human. I show that commitment because I'm listening to you and I'm seeing you and I'm reflecting that back.
Absolutely. Great summary. And I would add that you're checking in on how people are doing before what you're doing with them.
Okay. So we're setting the stage. We're connecting our nervous systems, or we're connecting ourselves first, and then we say, what do we go do now?
Yes.
Okay. And then the affirm part you said was, this is not like rah-rah statements. This is not thank you for your work. This is specifically linking your skills, talents, and abilities to the overall mission or purpose, and how we are benefiting from you exercising those skills, talents, and abilities.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very easy for an organization to tell people that they matter, right? The skill is in showing people exactly how they matter. So it's giving people the specific evidence of their significance. One example is to make sure you're collecting and telling stories of them and their work's impact. For example, I worked with the National Park Service, and there was one of their supervisors who manages all the facilities maintenance group. And one of the things that he would do, because it was very difficult work, and there's a ton of them, they work in very hostile environments, and they often feel very underappreciated. But one of the things that he would do that was a massive practice is he would go around and take pictures of, for example, if the crew repaired a bridge, he would take a picture of the tourists actually walking over a bridge. And on Friday, he had a practice to email everybody, hey, I saw this. This is the difference that it made. What I love about it is that it's real, right? You're giving people the evidence of the significance of what they're doing. So gathering and collecting those stories of significance and feeding them back is so critical. Another way is in how you say thank you or good job. So I bet everybody on this call or listening to this podcast says thank you or good job often. But that is not very psychological beneficial if it doesn't show people exactly how they made the difference you're thanking them for.
Mm-hmm.
So, one simple way to do this is anytime you say thank you or good job, describe the specific setting, name the specific behaviors, name their unique gifts, and then tell them a story of the impact that it had on you. Very powerful.
So not generic thank you, specific thank you. Here's exactly what I saw,
right?
Exactly how it made me feel, exactly how it made the customer or the other person feel, or whatever it is. And presumably at that point, you don't even need to say the like, hey, let's do more of that, because they're getting jazzed up just simply by the fact that you're giving them the affirmation.
Well, you're actually using their data to inspire themselves. So you're just feeding back. This is how you're significant. One of the problems with us as human beings is we have a very difficult time imagining our downstream impact. Yet we do it all the time. Like but we don't get notifications on our phone every time we change like someone's career trajectory or serve a customer in a way that it really impacts their life. And so what we have to do as leaders is we have to make it easier. We have to bring the downstream impact of people's work to the people as they're doing the work. For example, the research finds there are 3 predictors of a meaningful task in any task. So before you tell people what to do or how to do it or when to do it by, make sure you show them these 3 things. 1, show them vividly why it matters to a person. The second, the significance. The second, show them why it's necessary for some bigger whole. And 3, remind them of their strengths to do it. Before you tell them when to do it, what to do, how to do it, when to do it by. Because again, that sets the foundation that, I and what I'm doing matters, which is that key leading indicator.
Got it. Awesome. And then let's get to the needing part then.
Yeah, there's this old trope, right, in business of don't forget you're replaceable. And I don't know whoever thought that was inspiring.
Everyone likes to walk around with a rock hanging over their heads.
Yeah, because let's follow that to its end. When people feel replaceable, they'll act replaceable. In 1913, Max Ringelmann, he was an agricultural engineer, he did a study where he took a group of people and he had them pull on a rope and he attached it to a dynameter, which is this little device that measures force. And then he had individuals pull on a rope by themselves and he added up the force. And what was remarkable was that the individuals exerted more force than the groups. And why was this, right? It was because of perceived dispensability of effort. So when people feel replaceable, they will act replaceable. When people feel irreplaceable, they act irreplaceable. They show up, they commit. And oftentimes we do some things that inadvertently show people how they're replaceable. Or if we say, don't worry, I can just get another person to do this, or someone goes on vacation and then they come back, which is great. You want people to enjoy their vacation, but they come back and be like, everything was fine when you were gone. Or when somebody's not there and they missed a meeting, the meeting was good without you, instead of saying, hey, Alex, you're a really creative thinker. There are some things I wrote down that you could really help me with from that meeting. I want to go over those with you. Just that, right? All of a sudden you feel, wow, like I'm needed here. Or another practice of showing people how they're needed is making sure that you have some sort of tangible, measurable ladder to your bigger purpose.
Measurable ladder to your bigger purpose?
Yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So there's a story that gets told often of John F. Kennedy going to the Space Center in Houston to launch the Apollo missions. And allegedly he goes into a mop closet, right? And he says to a janitor, hey, what do you do here? And the janitor says, I'm putting a person on the moon. It's a nice story, but researchers at the Wharton School did an archival study of what NASA did to enable that thinking of, if I show you a management challenge, 300,000 contract workers all across the United States, many of them in different roles, all have to latch on to a mission that no one knew was possible. And so one of the pieces of photographic evidence found that on NASA facilities' blackboards, they all had ladders to the moon. The moon mission was at the top. At the bottom were their tasks for that month for each work group. And then the next rung up the ladder was the tangible, measurable objective that task was necessary for. The next rung up that ladder was the tangible, measurable objective that task was necessary for, all the way to get to putting a person on the moon by the end of the decade. So this is a practice called laddering. It's a skill. It's especially important for entrepreneurs, right? Because you're building something that may not fully exist yet. So putting that at the top of the ladder and showing people every day how what they're doing measurably is meeting tangible objectives that are needed to accomplish that. And it's a very powerful way of thinking, a very powerful practice. And then I would leave you with the 5 powerful words you could say to somebody is, if it wasn't for you.
If it wasn't for you.
If it wasn't for you, this wouldn't be possible. If it wasn't for you, this wouldn't have been possible in this meeting. If it wasn't for you, this wouldn't have been possible with regard to our funding. If it wasn't for you, and investors, anybody in your stake. Now, let's abstract this out for an entrepreneur. Anybody in your stakeholder world, investors, community, customers, you could apply making sure they feel noticed, affirmed, and needed to all of those people. And what an ecosystem that would be.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. So this is the process of building the skill set for us to create mattering within the company. And so we now have these skills, and like you were saying before, we also need to make sure that we're motivated and that we have now the ability, which we now have with these skills. And then how does the environment play a role here?
Yeah. So then the next step is to measure them. I think it's the 4 disciplines of execution, right? What's wildly important? Hopefully by the end of this podcast, you think mattering is wildly important. Act on the lead measures, right? Those are the skills. So that's what we're going to do. But then have some sort of compelling scorecard. So we have to have some way of measuring mattering. And there's some ways to do it. There's a general mattering scale. There's also a self-assessment that you can use to self-assess on these areas. We worked with one large company on creating a mattering blueprint that they actually determined as leaders the practices that they would be accountable for noticing, affirming, and needing people, because those could be customized in your environment, your context. Those will likely be different, right? If you're virtual, keeping your cameras on, having no tabs open, like things like that for noticing. You may have more specific things. They had a blueprint, and then that was their leaders' evaluation. So all the leaders were evaluated on their followers' ratings of them on each of those categories.
Right.
And that's how they also did their leadership development, making sure people understood how to see people, psychological safety, how to hear people, affirming, gratitude. And what that does when you have the self-assessment and then you have the team assessment is it gives you a continuing base of where you're at. A lot of people who do the engagement surveys that are packaged, which are fine in a way, don't really include the feeling of being significant. And so make sure that you're measuring that as well. And then the environment, this is huge, right? Because environment either makes our behavior possible or it determines that it will occur. Let's say I go through Zach's great workshop on creating mattering, and I want to start checking in with people. If I have back-to-back, if my calendar's filled back-to-back, then my environment doesn't make it possible for me to check in on you meaningfully. If I am in a distribution center, for example, and I'm measured on how much I get people to do, and I have to have all my interactions have to be tracked based on how much I get them to produce, and I'm timing how often they use the bathroom, my environment doesn't make it possible to care.
Right.
So when you think about your environment and think about these practices, noticing, affirming, and needing, which parts of your environment don't make it possible to do these things? Which parts of your environment determine that they will not happen? What I mean by that, if you don't have any touch points with people that are outside of scheduled meetings, it's unlikely that you will see them or truly hear them as people. If you don't have any tool or practice to actually remember the details of people's work, it's very unlikely that you will actually do that. So scanning your environment is critical.
Well, this is a very complete tour here of this topic around mattering, which is awesome. I want to shift for a second to a parallel conversation around purpose. You wrote a book called The Invisible Leader several years ago, and you talk about authentic purpose. You talk about the importance of meaningful work, and you just gave this example of laddering with the moon, the moon thing, and NASA and so on. But when you think about purposeful work, how are we crafting, or how can someone create for themselves or for their teams a purpose mindset?
Yeah. So, one of my favorite stories, and I tell it often because it's such a perfect illustration of what it means to be purposeful, is a janitor that I worked with when I was a PhD student. And my dissertation was, I embedded myself in a group of cleaners at a university for a year and a half to understand what made work meaningful. This is a very difficult job, right? And often overlooked. And we asked them the questions, when do you experience the most amount of meaning in your work? And there was one janitor, her name was Ellen, and she proceeded to tell me that it was anytime she cleaned the bathrooms in a university dormitory. And that sounds gross, So I broke out of researcher mode, and I was like, why are you sharing that story? And she said that it's the part of her job that she hates the most, but anytime she goes into that bathroom, she repeats to herself in her mind, I'm cleaning this bathroom so that these kids don't get sick. One of the core commonalities that we find with people who experience high levels of purpose in their work is they tend to have a so that mentality. People talk in this way. They can link whatever it is that they're doing, however pleasurable or unpleasurable, to its inevitable human impact, which brings meaning into the work. So one of my biggest suggestions is for an entrepreneur is to know your so that. Right? What is your so that? What is your so that for the things that you're doing on a daily basis? Doing this so that what? And repeat it to yourself. One of the things you can do is make a list of the things that you don't like doing in your role as an entrepreneur. I mean, there could be, this is dangerous, Alex.
Could be a long list.
It could be a long list. But then add, I'm doing this so that what at the end of it. And you will very quickly find, well, first of all, if you can't name the so that, let's talk about why you're doing it. But you'll very quickly, your brain will start thinking about your work in a different way. You'll start to believe that you matter. And that's why, there's a very big difference between having a purpose and being purposeful.
Okay. Say more.
So like purpose is our reason for being. It's our contribution, our use and usefulness. But I can have a big purpose. I can know my purpose. I can have a purpose statement, but not be contribution centered in how I approach my day. So being purposeful is contribution centered thinking, being, and doing. It's the difference between what do I have to do today and how is what I'm going to do today going to impact others? Right? It's the difference between, what did I not get done today versus thinking, who did I help today and who helped me today? So the focus of our mind, whether it's on overemphasized on achievement or getting through versus contributing, has a major impact on how we feel, whether we experience engagement. National Institutes of Health did a study that people who are purposeful on average live 7 years longer. It has a protective effect on our brains. We don't exactly know why or how. It 4 times more likely to improve engagement at work. I mean, this is common sense, right? You take Ellen, I'm cleaning this bathroom so that these kids don't get sick. You have George, I'm just trying to get through to the weekend. They both face the same stressful situation in work. It's not rocket science of who's going to respond, who has the so that, but common sense is not common practice. And so the practice of making sure that we're connecting to that so that every day is something that we can do. Ellen also crochets winter hats for all of the students in the dormitory that she's cleaning. And I asked her why. And she said, so if I go to my car in the winter and I just see one student wearing one of these hats, I'm reminded of why my job exists. So purposeful people also tend to put things in their environment that signal to them, remind them of why they're doing it. So I invite you, to look what's in your environment. If your environment doesn't remind you of your significance, it will remind you of something else.
Well,
Lots of times it's not good.
This is tying it back to what you were talking about at the beginning, which is if I feel like I matter, then I can link that to my work. Then I can see the bigger picture.
Exactly.
As long as it's resonating with me as a person.
Exactly. And this brings it full circle, right? Back to why purpose is so important. Because when we can be purposeful, it helps us to believe that we matter. And when we can keep seeing our evidence of our significance, especially as a leader or an entrepreneur, where it can be isolating, it can be lonely. There's a lot on our minds where we can stop and have practices that ground us, that we matter. We're more likely to actually take all the actions we talked about. We're more likely to actually accurately estimate the impact that we have on others. Because there is a lot of research that finds we underestimate the impact we have on how others feel. But when we really believe that we matter and we make a difference, then we act like we make a difference.
Wow, fantastic. Tremendous. Zach, this is a really great conversation around incredibly important topics, mattering and purpose. Any last thoughts viewing this through the lens of an entrepreneur who wants to get this right?
Yeah, it sounds really nice hearing a guy come on and talk about this, right? I'm very well aware that the luxury of my job is I don't have to do your jobs, right? I get to study how people work. You do the work. So what I want to leave you with is that you're the expert. You're the expert in your context. And so I want you to think about what you heard here and ask yourself, how can I make this work in my own way, in what I'm an expert in my context, in my business, in my life? Because I think oftentimes when people come on and talk about these inspiring concepts, it can feel detached. But I want you to really think about how you can customize all of what we talked about and make it work in what you're an expert in. And the second thing I would tell you is that I teach what I need to learn most. So this stuff I'm not doing this stuff all the time. But I'll tell you what, after this conversation, I'm reminded of some people I need to check in on just from talking with you, Alex, right? So I think this also goes to show, find a group of people who also believe in doing this and talk about it. Talk about what's hard about it, because if you're talking about it, you're thinking about it. If you're thinking about it, you're more likely to do it.
Fantastic. Well, hey, Zach Mercurio, really appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining us on The Conscious Entrepreneur.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it.